February is African Heritage Month in Nova Scotia. It's a time to celebrate the rich culture, achievements, and contributions of African Nova Scotians and communities of African descent in our region and across the nation. Nova Scotia has more than 50 historic African Nova Scotian communities with a long and complex history dating back over 400 years. This February, Blackout Podcast is collaborating with Immigrant Services Association of Nova Scotia, also known as ISANS, for their Artist in Residence program. This program aims to recognize and celebrate special months dedicated to the diverse communities of Nova Scotia by providing resources to newcomers. As part of this project, I'm interviewing 4 different Black artists living in Nova Scotia. Hello and welcome to the Blackout Podcast, where I get to talk to amazing people who do amazing things. And today I have my friend, fellow filmmaker, awesome human being, and the ED of Atlantic Filmmakers Cooperative, AFCOOP, Meus-Saunders. Thanks for coming to the podcast today.
Great to be here.
First off, congratulations on your new position. You know what? I want to say, I remember years ago when we met, and I think we've been in Film 5 twice.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
We've been in Film 5 twice. So what is it like? I remember meeting you and your passion for film and telling these stories, especially stories of people of color, especially women of color.
Yes.
That's Anyway, let's start from the beginning. How did this whole filmmaking thing start for you?
Well, okay, so I left the Bahamas. Well, before I came to Halifax, Nova Scotia, I worked in a casino, but I also ran a women's magazine. So I ran a women's magazine called New Woman Magazine, and we started a reality TV show. We went around the islands filming people. We had a model search that we would do quarterly for models. And so that took off and it ended up being Caribbean wide. But what I learned was that I didn't have a lot of film knowledge. So I spent a ton of money paying people that sometimes were good and that were not always good. And I ended up still doing a lot of the work. So I'm like, you know what, why don't I just learn how to do this? So it took me a while. I didn't want to leave my comfy job. I had a comfortable job, good living. And I was like, do I want to go to film school? And it took me another 2 years to kind of make up my mind and be like, okay, I'm going to do it. Packed up my belongings and I moved from the Bahamas to Canada to attend film school because we don't have film schools in the Bahamas. And the US was very, very, very different in pricing. So I'm like, Canada, I always go to Canada, so let's check it out. So I started off at Toronto Film School at Ryerson in Toronto. And then I ended up at Nova Scotia Community College. That's where I graduated. So that's how I kind of got into film.
Did you do screen arts?
I did screen arts.
I hear all the people working in the city kind of did screen arts. So how was the experience of doing NSCC screen arts?
Oh my God, it was so when I went to TFS, Toronto Film School, it was you were on your own basically. So I was in a class of 100 people, and we had to get stuff out. At NSCC, the difference is we had, you could talk to the lecturers or the professors or whatever anytime you needed. We learned a little bit of everything, which is what I really wanted and needed. So it was an awesome experience. I got to work with a lot of people who are now in the business, and they come to AFCOOP too. But it was, for me, it was what I needed, and I found it a really great experience. I learned a lot, and I ended up even traveling for my work term. So it was
awesome. Where did you go?
Where did I go for my work term? I went to Africa. I went to Tanzania. So I went on a documentation program with NSCC.
Wow.
So we went into the villages. I got to meet the tribes. We recorded their history, their oral history. We put it on film.
That is
amazing. We left them with that bit of information. And I also had a great experience.
Oh my God, that is freaking amazing. I didn't even know that. Anyway, so you came back okay, what was the plan? Okay, now you've done the thing, you have an idea of how to make film?
The plan was to stay in Canada, so you needed to get your PR. So in order to do that, you needed to find work, right? So I was oh Jesus, I don't want to go back home, right? Because, if you're not working full time. So the plan was to first find work. And luckily, I found, well, I had all of these odd jobs here and there. And I was like, oh, this is going to take forever to make up my hours to to apply for my permanent residency. So when I got a permanent part-time job, I'm like, at Screen Nova Scotia, I'm like, okay, I can still do my film stuff, but I can also make up my hours so that I can put in my application for my permanent residency. So yeah, so I mean, it was scary at first because I know a lot of friends who were going back home, or people who were not really following the right route and had to go back because they weren't following the right route. So yeah, but I got that, and I was like, okay, so I could just take my time and make up my hours and also do film work. And that's how I gradually got into the industry, because working there, you met a lot of people anyway. And then I also joined AFCOOP. So I was in AFCOOP, like once I started film school, Janet was like, AFCOOP is a great place to go. And that's how I was introduced to the film co-op. And I stayed there, and I built relationships and built friendships, and everything else was like everything else worked for me, because once you start to develop relationships, whatever, people are going to be like, oh, I remember you. You want to try this, or you want to do this? And that's how I got into, making films and being a part of the community.
So check this out though. One thing I noticed is like, you love making documentaries, but you also love making narrative film. Like, do you prefer one over the other one?
Well, when we went to school, we did a lot of little scripted stuff. But when I graduated, I found that it was easier to make documentaries, because you could go there and you could interview somebody, and it was more personable. It was more personal to me too. But I somehow found that a little bit easier, because to make a narrative film, you need a team of people. You need actors, you need casting. So it's a different thing, and it took a longer time, and you needed a little bit of funds too.
Yeah.
So with documentary, I wouldn't say documentary is cheaper, but you can kind of do it, by yourself or with a couple other people. So, but I love sci-fi and fantasy. They're my first love, believe it or not. But once I got into documentary, I also appreciated that part of, the film spectrum, that world, so. I wouldn't say I love one or the other, but right now I think I'm going to be... No, I wouldn't say. I mean, I can go either way.
Right. Because, I mean, you're right. Because especially with documentary, just get it small. But like with narrative, you have to spend time.
Yeah.
So I mentioned while I was just ranting about all the experiences we've had together that we did AFCOOP's Film 5, which is kind of like... rite of passage in making film.
It is, yeah.
I know one thing I love about your film is that it's so personal. Like, don't you ever get, I guess, afraid or worried? Even though the film is metaphorical, it's still personal. Like, you put so much of yourself into your films. Like, is that not a worry or fear?
No, it's not, because I'm out here. Like, my whole goal of making films is to show parts of myself, but to also represent my culture, represent my heritage, represent like what this person in this body has lived, so that it can probably influence or encourage somebody else. I'm not afraid. What might bother me though, if I present a character or represent a character that is a family member and they recognize it, but other than that, my personal life is a free for all. Like, no.
Okay, but another thing, I guess, when making such personal stories or telling such personal stories, for me, I think I just stopped and just like, whatever, or I'll produce people's stuff. Because like sometimes when you write something that's personal to you and people don't get it.
I know.
I
know, but see, that's the thing, right? So, we've done a lot of scripting and all that stuff. So if they don't get it, then just leave it for a minute. Let it sit. And then when you come back to it, you will have a whole different perception of that. And so I'm not offended. Like, that's fine. You don't get it.
I'm not offended.
My first script that I did about lady and all this stuff, and that didn't make it in. But I'm like, you know what? That's okay. That's okay. Let it sit. That's not going anywhere. I can come back to that at any time and build that out, or and I'll see it differently too. And probably when I come back to it, that will probably be the right time for it. So I'm not worried.
But then I remember after that film, you just spun and you made this film about women. Like, what was the inspiration for that? And what was the process of making that film?
Well, I also worked at, what are these places? Oh my God, I don't want to talk. So I worked at one of those, phone places where you call, what you call those places?
Call center?
Call center, oh my God. It was not the best experience.
I guess that's why you don't remember the name.
No, I remember the name, but I met a lot of interesting people at the call center. And I remember I met this young lady who became a part of the film, Jo, and she was so interesting, and she was, she would dress up in drag, but as a man, and people were conflicted with that. And like just meeting her and her personality, and I'm like, you know what? I wanted to share her story, but but during that time I was also meeting all of these other interesting women in Halifax, and I'm like, why don't I just do a documentary about a few women who are doing like different things? They come from different perspectives, but they're all they're all African or connected in some way, and let's just tell their story. One of them lived here. One of them. Well, two of them lived here, but they lived in different communities. Jo was in the LGBTQ plus whatever community. Kayla was a part of the African Nova Scotian community doing building, and Maya was, her family came from away, but she's lived in Halifax, but she came from a different background in that she was an artist. She would paint and do all of this stuff. So I'm like, okay, these are three interesting people. Let's just try to put them together in a little something and just share this. So my inspiration initially came from Jo and her life. And I was like, this is so interesting. And because she was getting so much I don't know if I should say backlash, but she wasn't being accepted in a lot of places. And I'm like, why?
Yeah, that's weird.
So, yeah, so that's part of how that came together. But I love to include women because I'm a woman, and if they're coming from different places with different stories, for me that's even better because I get to learn from them, but I also get to share that. I think that my major concern is that I'm doing their story justice. So I'm always concerned about how am I doing the best job that I can. Because with documentary, sometimes you don't have a lot of money to spend. So you're shooting and editing stuff yourself. And sometimes you don't always get the best end product, even if you get the best story. So I'm always concerned about that. Yeah.
So, and then after that film did rounds, played a couple of festivals, you kind of did this proof of concept. And like, did that proof of concept become your film, or like, did you take elements of that? Because, you shot that proof of concept and it was like this alien person. Did you take elements of that to make your film 5? To make Eua-Lander? Do you remember this proof of concept you made a while ago?
Yeah. Oh, you remember that?
Yes, I remember the proof of concept.
Well, actually, I'll tell you about Eua-Lander. So I love sci-fi. So I've actually written a whole feature film, and it's around this black woman who's a superhero, and so when I thought I wanted to do something small on a smaller level, and I wanted to kind of start to introduce this concept. So I said, look at Eua-Lander film 5, maybe like a 5 or 7 minute script. Let's build something out and let's see if we can do that. And it was, at first I was like, Jesus, Eric, how are you going to shoot this on a film 5 budget? Because with all of this transformation and all that stuff. But I was like, let's try it. So if we can do this, and I kind of fell in love with that story now, so I'm building that out too. But I have a whole feature film that I've already written. And it's around this warrior woman who's not actually presented as a woman. That part of inspiration came from Jo.
Yeah.
and she travels across this make-believe plane and this make-believe world, and it's a huge film. But I said, before I can actually dive into that, I need to start with something small and something simpler. And so the idea of Eua-Lander came into being, and I was like, okay, let's try it. And then being in a film 5, you get all of this feedback from people too, so you kind of get a decent script. But now I've kind of fallen in love with that too, and I've started to write a feature on that as well. But that's you have to have all this backstory and all that stuff. But my ideas always come from somewhere, and sometimes like how you dig that up, I didn't even remember that. They always, they come back in a different form. So if somebody don't love something initially, that's fine.
Yeah.
Let it sit.
Yeah, no, because I remember seeing the photos from that proof of concept. I was like, well, whatever this is, it's going to be great. And then when you made Eua-Lander, I was like, did elements of that come into Eua-Lander?
No.
I was like, oh.
They're not going to die.
Okay, so let's talk about the process, right? I mean, you had the first scripts with the with the lady that was having like mental
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
That made it into the phase. It didn't go into the second phase. And then we got into this phase that was like, if you get in, you are in. It's
I
like...
know. I was like, okay. But you know, it was good though, because like, you remember the first time we went to Film 5, you were so tense and you were like, oh, you got to get into the second. So what it allowed us to do is
just
kind of like
calm
down and actually work on your script and work on your characters. So,
and also not like, because like that first one was like, you're still battling with people.
Yeah, your competition. So you weren't getting the right feedback.
Exactly.
People were giving you shit or telling you shit. Excuse my language. They were telling you.
No, you can say that. You can say that
because they just wanted you to not make it.
Yeah,
you're basically competing against them.
It's like I'm trying to make a like, you know, it's a zero-sum game. If you are in, I'm out. So I gotta make sure.
I gotta tell you something that's gonna throw you off.
When this new update happened, like, you know, I'm glad that happened, and you're like, okay, when you're in, you know you're in, and you're gonna go make this film.
Right.
How was that experience for you? Like the actual experience with the Film 5 where you made Eua-Lander?
It was so great because you learned so much, and you got feel like nobody was trying to tear you down. They were actually trying to help build your script up and build your story up. So it was a totally different experience, as you can imagine. And you know, I like, people were giving you good feedback, and it's about you being able to accept, like, okay, this is not a criticism. This is an observation. What am I going to use it or not? So I found that really helpful, honestly. And I'm still working with some of these people now, like writers. I'm like, okay, we got a script. Like over the Christmas, I'm supposed to be chilling, but we're actually going to be looking at some other people's work and sharing ideas and stuff like that. So that's a relationship.
That's what you've been asking. So how did you, like, with choosing producers? Because everybody wants to be a writer and director.
Nobody wants to produce. Nobody wants.
So what was the process for picking up a producer?
So at first it's about, like, you know, Film 5, like we don't have a lot of immersion, and we have like producers who are either at the bottom or at the top, and they need to build out the middle. So for me, finding a producer, like, I already know a little bit about production, but the most important concepts or the most important things that I was looking for is somebody who was good with people, who was patient, and who was going to support me. As a writer director, you needed somebody, and I had a couple people at first, and then people got busy with setting, and I ended up with the perfect person for that project, you know. Emma, who was like, you know, Emma's calm, and she's like very patient, and she's good with people, and producers need to be people person. So, you know, because you're dealing with all these different characters. Yep. And you have to know how to kind of deal with them.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've written the script, you know, done your casting. How did that happen? Like, how did you come up with your actors?
You know, who I had in my documentary, remember Maya, who I had in my documentary? She ended up being in the scripted piece too. So, and also there are not a lot of Black women who are actors. So sometimes you're working with the same set of people, or not, or sometimes you're just working with people who are non-actors. But for me, characters was like I had to have a relationship with these people, or they had to fit like some parts of the character. So my two main characters in Eua-Lander, they were best friends or good friends. So both when I was in film school, both Maya and Michael had worked together before in one of my little school scripts. So they kind of already had a relationship, right? So I'm like, okay, so this is
you just resurrected that relationship. Yeah.
So I'm like, they already know each other, so we don't have to fake this, or we don't really have to act this out. This is a natural connection that I'm building on. So I kind of work with people like that, whether they fit, or even if they don't, like, if that fit a part of their personality, or if they're a really good actor. I mean, we don't have a whole slew of people to pick from, you know. So you got to figure out, like, which angle am I taking. Yep. So that's how I kind of build those two out.
What are some difficulties you had in that production?
Well, it was the time. Like, we wanted to make this sci-fi alien being, and you had very limited time. people were committed, and then you had Colin and his partner did an awesome job, but they were also testing, like, this is their first time working with like this type of prosthetics, because he normally does horror stuff, like blood and gore, when you now have to build out this scaly alien person, and then you have to match the skin and all this. So it's a lot of like testing and stuff like that. So part of that. But then not only that, it was during the heart of COVID. A lot of people got COVID.
Right.
A lot of people got COVID. Like Keith did that. Our DP got COVID first, and I'm like, oh shit, how much freaks out before we shoot? I hope he gets better. Like, so, and then like a couple people got COVID, and then we also had like incidents. We had an accident, a car accident. So a lot of little bits and pieces. Like, you just had to manage. We couldn't find a location to initially because of COVID, and then when we found something, we wanted something that was spacious enough so that we could kind of put everybody in their spaces, because we had to have this costume and everything on set to be able to apply. So it's time, it was managing time, managing the bit of funds we have, and then dealing with all these other issues like COVID and stuff like that. But I mean, we had awesome first AD, and we had a really I was really surprised. Like this is my first time actually shooting a film 5. I was so surprised with the crew and their commitment. Like, I was like, they're not gonna care about this. They just wanna. But people were so committed to this little project. I was like, oh wow, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that blew me away. So I was like, okay, this is a great experience because of that.
So you made the film, played. One of the festivals I've always wanted to play in is Silver Wave. They just don't care for my film. Like, you got the nomination. How was it? Like, yeah.
I was even surprised when we got. I'm like, Emma, we got nominated.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god. So then we made this little video in case we had won. But I was just excited to be nominated, right? I was like, okay. So and since then we've been applying to all these other festivals. So I'm still gonna, run and do stuff. But I was excited. I was just excited to be nominated. I didn't know whether or not we'd win, but I'm like, okay, let's just go with it.
So you're working on Eua-Lander. It's playing festivals. You now decide to apply to be executive director. Like, what?
Well, the good thing is I'd already done my film 5.
Right.
I don't want this to be a conflict of interest or whatever. So, but I knew that honestly, moving forward, I knew that I needed to make steps in a different direction.
Right.
So I just needed to get some stuff under my belt. So I was happy when I got into that film 5 program. I was like, yes, one down, and how much more to go? But so no, the thing is, right? So when the position came up, I was like, oh my God, no, that's just too much work. Why would I want to do that? But then I thought about it, and I thought, well, I'm like, who else is going to do this job? Like people are going to apply, but then I thought about some of the candidates, and I'm like, well, if they could do this, why can't I do it, right? But the thing for me was just trying to make that decision because of the time commitment. That's a lot of work.
It is.
It's a lot. It's also a learning curve, and it's also working in a different capacity. So before I was comfortable working as a group, but now I'm actually managing and making these executive decisions. And so that takes a little bit of getting used to.
And the move?
Oh my geez. The move. Moving a film co-op is no easy task. And again, COVID. I got COVID. The tech coordinator got COVID, the programs coordinator. I was like, Jesus, what is going on here? Everybody. And then we had a little hurricane that was coming.
Oh my God,
so the perfect storm, as Chris would say. I was like, Chris, why would you call this? And that's what it is. Everybody was sick, and I was like, okay.
And then the storm came in.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, you've been through that. So if you've gotten through that, then what else? I mean, you should be able to just, mosey on.
So, I mean... What was the process like, I guess the interview, and how did you feel when you knew you got the position?
Well, I was still, I worked at Screen Nova. I love working at Screen Nova Scotia, and I love that environment, but I also felt that it was time for me to do something else. So I was still, even though I was going through the whole interview process and all that, I was still kind of like trying to make up my mind, like, okay, if I get this, am I ready? Or am I going to do this? So it was just going through the process, but I was still, honest to God, I was still undecided until the last minute. And then I was like, okay, Erica, you got this. You're going to move into this, and now you have to move forward, But it was scary. It's a scary process. Change is scary.
It is.
And when you're moving from one direction to the other and taking on so much more responsibility, it's like, oh, do I have the time for that? But I mean, for me, it's like waking up every morning and I meditate. I give myself 10, and people laugh at it, but I give myself 10, 15 minutes to just calm myself and getting to myself. And then I'm ready to face the day. And that's how I wake up every morning now. So I've become this different person because of the responsibility. And you have to, for me, I believe that being physically healthy, mentally healthy, that's the best way to move forward in any job. So that's become like my priority. And then I do what I have to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, and how's the position been so far for you?
I mean, at first it was rocky, but you have a lot of people who are like, you have so many people willing to help. And I had the former ED Martha, who was always there. She's like, she's become my big sister now. I'm like, what's going on? And then I had the interim director, but you also have people who've been in this position before. And you had people in the community who's like, Eric, if you need help with this or this. So I have a lot of people asking me to like reach out to them if I need that. So I have that. So it's just me kind of trying to figure out, who am I going to reach out to with the time that I have, because I still have to manage like 6 and 7 different things. So all of them are going at once. So yeah, but you have people who are offering help. So that's good. And people who are supporting you in that position. So that's that. And then you have a board of directors who, you can talk to, because that's like, oh shit, such really good a lot of shit. I'm like, why am I doing this? But then you get into it and you be like, you know what, this is where I need to be right now.
Right.
And this is where I should be right now. And so you start to build from there. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. What do you love about the job?
I like that, like, I feel comfortable in the environment because I've already in the film. I've already in the film business. I'm already used to, like, I've been a part of AFCOOP. I know how it works. I know how to gear and all of that stuff I learned in school and learned working bits and pieces here in the industry. But I also get to, manage stuff and delegate a lot. But I find that every task I'm giving and every task that I'm able to complete, I'd be like, I feel more comfortable in that position. And I feel like, okay, I'm getting better at this. And it makes me feel stronger as an individual. So I like that that's building me as an individual as well, because every time you're able to accomplish something, or even if you get a little knocked down and you get back up, that's a step in the right direction. So I love that about it. I'm growing. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, doing this job now, are you still gonna focus? Like, are you gonna have time to make this feature?
Of course. One thing I can say about myself, I know how to manage my time. And I've learned that from film school. I've learned that like on a daily basis, right? So I know that the first year is just getting into the film corp, and so I'm learning as much as I can, as fast as I can. So that once I've kind of gotten that down, now I can be like, okay, this is what I'm doing for the year, and what do I do with the rest of my time, and how do I manage the rest of my time so that I'm able to get my script done, do this, yada, 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 plan this out. And so it's management too, but that's happening, babe. That's happening.
So like with this whole, like, like the African Heritage Month and stuff, being a Black woman working in the film industry, what's your experience been like?
Well, first of all, I should say I'm Caribbean. And Caribbean women really can take the world on their shoulders. They shouldn't have to. But like being Caribbean and growing up, like, growing up in a Black country, it's a different experience for me. So I don't feel like, some people be like, oh, I have imposter syndrome. No, I'm supposed to be here. and if you put me in this room, I'm going to be in this room. Like, for me, it's a different mentality. I do understand people being like, I'm not, but I grew up in a country where I do what I do and I am who I am. There's no question about that. So now moving to another country or in another environment where people are like, oh, like, who are you talking to? Like, you're not talking to me. I belong here. And I'm supposed, so I for me, so it's just dealing with sometimes the reactions or the attitudes of other people. And I'm like, and be like, I find it always like, I'm in disbelief one day if they approach me in that manner, because I'm like, I don't know where you get this from, but you can't be talking to me in that fashion, But I mean, so it's an adjustment. But I'm going to do what I'm going to do because that's how I was raised, and I'm comfortable in that, right? So I mean, even though there are challenges, I'm not deterred or shaken or whatever. I'm like, bring it on, buddy. I can handle it. So yeah.
Wow. Every time I talk to you, I never want it to end. But okay, I'm gonna let you go because I have a lot on your plate. But I want to let you go with this question, though. I mean, you've come here, built this life for yourself, running AFCOOP now. What are some lessons you've learned that you wish you could tell yourself 10 years ago?
Well, I would tell myself not to put so much pressure on myself because, growing up, well, I'm the oldest, I'm the eldest daughter, and also in a community, growing up in a community where women are the matriarchs, they take a lot. So you always find that you have a lot of pressure. And women in general have a lot of pressure. They have a lot of shit to deal with all the time, especially women who are running a family. And I'm like, I don't know how they do it, but they're doing it. So I would say, give yourself space. Don't put so much pressure on yourself, and then everything is going to work out. One way or the other, everything is going to work out. So the best thing that you can do for yourself is to take care of yourself. And I'm learning this as I get older. Take care of yourself physically and mentally, and then everything else can come because you're there, you're present, and you can handle but if you're not mentally sound or you're not physically able, you can't do anything. So that would be my advice. Take care of yourself first. And then everything else will happen when it happens. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Like, people do shit at 50, 60, 70. People like, oh, I have to do this by then. I'm like, you don't have to do anything. You could just sit there and just live, But it's what you want to do. And just take it easy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Erica, it's always great to talk to you. I can't wait to read this feature Eua-Lander version.
Oh my God.
But thank you so much for giving me your time, and thank you for coming to the podcast today.
I enjoyed it, and it's always good talking to you, man. Yep. Oh, well, yeah, for sure.